An orphan boy saves a tiger cub from poachers, but that's when the real trouble starts. The cub won't leave his side, and the boy slowly starts to bond with it. This kicks off an incredible adventure for the two of them. At the beginning, we see an orphanage hidden deep in the jungles of Nepal. Just a week ago, this boy named Bulmiki arrived at the orphanage after losing his mother in the Nepal earthquake, which is why he was sent there. In the jungle, there was a tigress who had given birth to a little cub just a few weeks ago. But the cook from the orphanage, Janine, had his eyes on this tiger and her cub. You see, in this part of Nepal, it was pretty common to hunt tigers for their skins and sell the cubs on the black market. Janine had been keeping a close watch on the tigress for quite a while, because he would tip off a hunter named Sinchi. If Sinchi managed to hunt a tiger based on Janine's info, Janine would get a cut. Sinchi was one of those hunters who operated outside the law. In the jungle, these kids would catch animals and birds and sell them for a high price to rich people. The kids at the orphanage were pretty happy, but Bulmiki wasn't at all. He had come so far from home, and nothing around here felt familiar. He felt really lonely. One day, their teacher, Miss Hannon, was teaching them about some holy places in Nepal, and Bulmiki stood up and shared a story he had heard from his mom. She used to say that many years ago, a saint rode on the back of a tiger. He climbed up the Himalayas, and that tiger just jumped into a cave in the mountains. Now there's a temple there, and even in the Valmiki movie, they show that temple. But the school kids don't believe a word of it. Instead, they just make fun of him. Valmiki really doesn't like that, so he decides he can't stay here any longer. Once everyone is asleep at night, he quietly grabs his clothes and some food from the fridge and sneaks out to go home. When Valmiki gets a good distance into the jungle from the ashram, suddenly, he hears gunshots and goes to check out where the noise is coming from. He hides and sees Sinchi and his crew have just shot a tiger and trapped its cub in a cage. Janan had no idea Sinchi would kill the tiger, but there's nothing he can do against them. While Sinchi and his guys are busy loading the dead tiger into their vehicle, Bulmiki risks his life to free the cub from the cage. He grabs the cub and runs away from there, escaping from Sinchi and his crew. The kid starts looking around, but since the Valmiki kids are hiding away just in time, they can't find them. Only because that orphanage is there. Sinji tells Janine that maybe one of the orphanage kids did this, so you should go back to the orphanage and check properly if any kid is missing. I'll call you again tomorrow. Saying this, Sankara takes the dead tiger and leaves. Meanwhile, the Valmiki tiger cub moves quite a distance away, and they find an abandoned farmhouse to spend the night. They'll hang out here, and as soon as they wake up in the morning, they see that the little tiger is really hungry. So, Bulmiki pulls some milk out of his bag and feeds the cub. After that, he ties a rope around its neck to take it out and release it in the jungle. A little while later, Bulmiki lets the cub go in the forest and heads back home towards Kathmandu. But here's the funny part. As soon as he gets a little way down the path, the little tiger doesn't stay in the jungle but starts following him instead. Eventually, it gets close and starts playing with him. Seeing the innocent behavior of the tiger cub, Bulmiki felt a lot of affection and decided to take the cub with him to the forest. Meanwhile, the next morning, Sinji kept calling Janine to scold him and insisted that they must find out who was responsible for the cub's actions. Since the ashram was in the jungle, the next day Miss Hannon found out that a tiger had been hunted in the forest that night. She called all the kids together, and it turned out that Bulmiki was missing. Hannon quickly started searching for him everywhere, but couldn't find him anywhere in the end. He filed a missing person report with the police, but he decided he would find him on his own. After walking around all day, that night, Bami woke up with the tiger cub by the riverbank. Every morning, Bami noticed some rangers had left a boat there. He figured it would be faster to take the boat instead of walking, so he took the opportunity and set off on the boat with the tiger cub. But then a storm hit, and their boat capsized in the strong current. Still, Balmy didn't care about his own life. He was focused on saving the tiger cub. The kid is safe first, and the kid hugs Bulmicky, forgetting all about his fear. Actually, Bulmicky has slowly come to love the kid a lot, and he gives the kid a name, Murthi. They walk together through the jungle all day, and when they venture quite a distance, Bulmicky suddenly spots a girl by the river. But the moment he calls out to her, she sees Bulmicky and Murthi together, and starts to run away in fear. However, after a short distance, she trips in the sand and falls down. Bulmicky comes over to her and says, "You don't need to be afraid of us. I'm not going to harm you. We're both really hungry. Do you have any food?" Then the girl goes to their village with the Bulmickies, but as soon as they arrive, the girl's mom gets really angry when she sees the Bulmickies and Murthi, and they don't want to give them any space. But the girl's grandpa was a really nice guy, so he lets the Bulmickies stay. Miss Hannon didn't want to wait for the police investigation anymore, so she took Janine with her to pull the address from the Bulmickies' file, and then she went with Janine. After spending the night in the village, Balmiki sets off the next morning to look for him. He milks a goat in the village and gives some milk to Murthi to eat. Then the two of them head back to Kathmandu. Meanwhile, Miss Hannon arrives in Kathmandu with Janan. Inside the car, Janan is messaging Senti for updates, which raises Miss Hannon's suspicions, but she doesn't say anything to Janan at that moment. Eventually, Janan makes an excuse to look for Balmiki and gets off at a bus stand to search for him. Then Miss Hannon heads straight to Bulmicky's house. Bulmicky and Murthi hitch a ride from a tourist and arrive in Kathmandu. When he gets home, which was already pretty wrecked from the earthquake, he gets emotional seeing pictures of his wife and mother. Little Bulmicky sits there for a while, hugging his mom sorry. Meanwhile, Janine messages Sinji with Bulmicky's address. Once Sinji gets the address, she sets off shortly after. He takes his people to Bulmicky's house, and when he gets there, he snatches Murthi away from Bulmicky. Bulmicky, being just a little kid, didn't know what to do, so he sat quietly in a corner, feeling sad. A little while after Sankara left, Miss Hannon comes in and is really happy to see Bulmicky. She gives him some food and water. Bulmicky then tells Miss Hannon about Murthi, but at first, she doesn't want to believe him. She thinks it might just be some made-up story from Bulmicky. Meanwhile, Sinchi is pretty happy to see Janine. He gave a lot of money to buy his dream bike, but Balmiki was determined to save Murthi no matter what. So after Miss Hannon fell asleep, he sneaked out again. When dawn broke, Balmiki found himself in an abandoned area, and a bunch of guys came running up to him, grabbing him. It turned out they were all his friends, but many of them had become orphans since the earthquake, so now they all stuck together. Balmiki filled his friends in on everything about Murthi, and they already knew Sanchi's address for a long time. They all decided together that they would rescue Murthi at night. They brought Bulmicky to Sinchi's hideout. At first, Bulmicky carefully went in and freed Murthi from the cage, but in the rush to get out, he accidentally knocked into a glass bottle, and it fell and shattered. The noise alerted Sinchi. Just when Sinchi came to catch them, Bulmicky's friends told him to take another route. They all ran past Sinchi, and that's how Bulmicky and Murthi managed to escape with a tiger cub they had found. Janine was losing it. She couldn't think straight. All her anger was directed at Balmeet. She kept yelling that she wanted a guy, no matter what. Later, Janine met with Miss Hannah again and asked where Balmeet could be. Miss Hannah filled her in on everything Balmeet had told her and mentioned that he wanted Murthi to be dropped off at Tiger's Nest, a place where the tigers are super safe. As soon as Janine heard this, she messaged Sinji right away. But this time, Miss Hannah wasn't letting Janine slip away. When she grabbed Janine's phone to check, she quickly realized what was really going on. He's been helping the hunters and getting really angry at Janine. Meanwhile, after a bit of traveling, Bulmicky and Murthi meet a guy named Madhav. Bulmiki opens up to Madhav, saying he actually wants to leave tiger nest with Murthi. This tiger nest was floating near the Himalayas and pretty close to Madhav's village. Madhav was a good guy, so he tells Bulmiki that his uncle's car will be coming soon, and they can head back to the village together if Bulmiki wants to join them. So, after a little while, Bulmiki, Madhav, and Murthi hop in the car heading towards tiger nest. As they keep going, Ginny fills Miss Hannah in on everything. After hearing all of it, Miss Hannah gets an idea. She heads over to her old friend Gobinda's shop and says, "I need to get to the Himalayas really fast, but the quickest way is by plane, and I don't have any money for a ticket." Hearing this, Ginny hands her the cash she got from Sanchi. Meanwhile, Madhabi's uncle drops them off at the foot of the mountain and heads back home, while Madhav takes Bulmiki and goes towards their place. After walking for a bit, Madhav shows his dad that some people are collecting honey from the steep side of a huge hill. When his dad sees Madhav, he comes down and hugs him. Madhav had actually gone to the city to sell his dad's honey. Madhav introduces his dad to Bulmiki and Murthi, and everyone there is pretty happy to see Murthi. Then they all head over to Madhav's house. There, Bulmiki is served a hearty meal, and Murthi is given some milk to drink. After resting for a while, Bulmiki gets ready to head out again, and that's when Madhav. To stay warm, Madhav's dad gives Bami a bunch of warm clothes and tells him to take care of himself while hugging him goodbye. Madhav walks a bit with Bami and Murthi to help them get on their way. While checking the map, he tries to head towards Tiger's Nest. After a few hours of walking, Madhav reaches a peak and points out the path to Tiger's Nest for Bami. He shows him some birds and says, "If you follow them, you'll get straight to Tiger's Nest." Then, Madhav bids farewell to Bami and Murthi right there. Miss Hannah takes off and arrives in the Himalayas by plane, where a guard known to her friend Govind is there to help her. Meanwhile, for hours, Bulmiki and Murthi are climbing up the mountain. The higher they go, the colder and harsher the weather gets. Murthi keeps trying to play with Bulmiki along the way, but at one point, Bulmiki realizes he's lost the trail. Suddenly, a cold, stormy wind starts blowing all around them, so he finds a little nook in the mountain to take shelter with Murthi, but quietly. The storm started to get worse, and due to the extreme cold, Bulmiki passed out. The next morning, some people from the mountain came and rescued Bulmiki and Murthi. A few hours later, they regained consciousness. The locals were really nice, and they did everything they could to help Bulmiki and Murthi recover. Once the weather settled down again, they showed Bulmiki the way to Tiger's Nest. Bulmiki set off with Murthi again, this time through the jungle. He was on his way, but he was far from civilization, and after all this time, the strain was really wearing him down, making Bulmiki quite weak. Plus, Murthi wasn't paying attention to him, and out of frustration, he snapped at her, which made her run away. Later that night, Bulmiki lit a fire to warm himself up. The next morning, as he moved a bit ahead, he suddenly spotted Tiger's Nest right in front of him. Seeing it in person made Bulmiki really happy because he had only heard stories about it from his mom before, and now here it was before his eyes. After a little while, she notices that Murthi is right there. She had actually been keeping an eye on Bulmiki from a distance. When Bulmiki was leaving with Murthi, Sanchi shows up and tells Bulmiki to hand over the tiger cub. But brave Bulmiki refuses. Then Sanchi pulls out his gun and tries to shoot Bulmiki. At that moment, Murthi jumps on Sanchi to save Bulmiki, who starts shouting for help while Murthi attacks Sanchi and jumps off the mountain from way up high. While reading below, Sanchi dies right there. A little while later, Bulmiki hears Miss Hannah's voice calling out to him from a distance. When he sees her, he opens up about everything. Then, together, they start taking Murthi towards Tiger's Nest. As they get closer, Murthi suddenly breaks away from them and runs into Tiger's Nest. The monks there are really happy to see her. Bulmiki goes in and meets the head monk, who tells him the same story that his mother used to tell him all those years ago. At one point, Bulmiki, when asked where Murthi would stay, the sage replied that a mother is needed for a tiger cub to grow up, and there's a tigress not too far from here who has 2 cubs. We'll try to get that tigress to accept Murthi as one of her own. Hearing this, Valmiki brought Murthi to the tigress's territory with the other sages, and they waited a long time for her to show up. After a while, the tigress came roaring through the forest with her 2 cubs, but Murthi still wasn't willing to leave Valmiki. So, Bulmiki keeps telling her, "Whatever you want to learn, I can never teach you that. From today, this is your home. You'll stay here and learn the rules of this place." Hearing this, Murthi immediately runs towards the tigress, but suddenly it hits her how Bulmiki had saved her from the hunter and brought her here after all that time. So, she comes back and hugs Bulmiki. It was such an emotional moment that it brought tears to my eyes. The bond between the fierce tiger and an ordinary little kid. You can't help but feel emotional watching this, right? Anyway, after that, Bulmiki removes the rope from Murthi's neck and sets her free. He tells her one last time, "I will miss you, Murthi," and encourages her to go. Murthi then runs over to the tigress, but things are super tense. Everyone's watching anxiously, wondering if the tigress will accept her or attack.